This was during my summer break when I was 21 years old and in college. It was my first break since starting college that I actually decided to stay in-state rather than going back home to live with my parents for the 3 months out of school. A good friend of mine had a place near campus with a spare room and offered to let me rent it for insanely cheap. As far as jobs go, I tried out something new every few months because my scheduling with school was always pretty hectic, but during this break and for a few months prior, I had been house-sitting. There were a few websites and apps that you could easily sign up for, and really the job was simple and didn't feel much like a job. Most people needing house sitters had huge, expensive houses, sometimes with pets or plants that they wanted me to take care of while they were away, and in return, not only did I get paid, but also could live in their super nice luxury house for a few days or even weeks. I got this specific house just a couple days into summer break. I went and met the owners a day before they left to get instructions and a list of things to do while they were gone. It was a really nice couple in their 30s, and right off the bat, when I pulled up to the house, I was a little confused. It was a small, older, unassuming home, sort of in the plains on the edge of town, not the typical customers in need of house-sitting, and they were only going to be gone for 4 days. At first, I thought it was easy money. It wasn't until toward the end of our meeting that I figured out really why they wanted a house sitter. The couple mentioned that during the day, all I needed to do was water their plants and make sure the house didn't burn down, but to be a little more cautious at night. They said some people had been coming by recently that they didn't know, and while they didn't have anything strange happen with them, they just wanted to be safe and have someone watch the house while they were away. As they were telling me this, they continually interrupted themselves, saying they were sure it was nothing at all and that they were overreacting, and played it down to be nothing to worry about. And I guess it worked because I actually didn't even process how strange it was until the next day when I arrived at the home after they had left. Being out on the plains in an older home felt very isolating and uncomfortable. I wasn't used to it at all. Every direction I looked out the windows, it was just tall grass, with the tree line far back and nearly invisible when it was dark out. And the sound, or a lack of sound, is what really felt unsettling. It was dead silent outside, which made every noise in the house seem even louder. The creaky floors and walls, and just everything about it was creepy to me. Part of me wanted to leave, feeling like some information was left out about what this place really was or why they hired me to begin with. But after that first night went by without any problems, I figured I was just in my head too much. I made breakfast and did some chores around the house, then sat outside on the porch for a while. The owners texted me asking how everything was going. I said everything was good. I will say, sitting out there alone felt nice now that the strange feelings had passed. It was just quiet and relaxing, the grass blowing in the wind and the birds flying around, not stuff I see or hear very often living near the campus in the city. Once the sun fell, I headed in to watch TV and chill for the night. It was sometime around 8 when I stood up from the couch just to stretch and take a minute. I went over to the window, casually pushing the curtain aside and looking out of the backyard. But someone was out there, standing right in the field. I was more confused than anything and just stared at them. He was definitely looking at the house, which as more time passed made me more uncomfortable, so I closed the curtain. Was this what the owners were talking about? The more I thought about it, the more insanely creepy it was. Way out here on the outskirts, some random guy watching this old house. Something wasn't right. I looked back out. The man was still there, but the longer I looked, I realized he wasn't alone. There were others, maybe 3 or 4. It was hard to make out whether some of them were figures or just shadows from the tall grass. I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. If not for the owners having mentioned something like this, I immediately texted them, saying there were a bunch of people watching the house outside,
and the reply I got wasn't what I was expecting. They reassured me the people wouldn't do anything, that they never had done anything, and just to ignore them. But they also said if I was really nervous about it, then I could call the cops. I didn't know what to do. This was their house, and I'd never called 911 before or been in any situation like this, so I trusted the owners that it was okay. I know now just how weird this was, and didn't realize how the owners were almost manipulating me into not calling the cops or being worried about it. I should have known how odd it was that they were so sure about the people being harmless, despite supposedly never having had any interaction with them. I went to look out the window again. All of them were gone. No one was in the field of grass or by the tree line. It was empty out there. I stayed on edge, though, checking the windows for a couple of hours. It had to be 1 a.m. At least I didn't feel in danger anymore, but also not safe either. The thought of sleeping felt impossible, though. My eyes were getting heavy. I couldn't stop thinking about those people, eerily watching the house from out in the field. It made no sense to me. I got up from the couch to get another glass of water to keep myself busy, and as I moved into the hallway, I heard a slight creak above me. I stopped walking and heard it again. I looked up at the ceiling. There was no upstairs in this house. Slow, heavy thumps moved across the roof, stopping when they got just above the front door. I jolted back and froze. I stared down the hallway at the door. They knocked again. I started to slowly back up, my footsteps creaking on the wooden floor as I tried to get back to the bedroom and lock myself in. But before I made it, my phone started ringing. It was the owners calling me. I hesitated before answering. He said in almost a disturbingly calm voice that everything was okay, but that I needed to walk out of the house and leave. I told him the people were out there at the door right now. There was a pause. Then he repeated himself, telling me to walk out and leave, that the people weren't going to do anything to me. I was in shock. I could tell in his voice that he already knew. He knew that they were out there right now. The person outside was still knocking, much harder now, like he was getting impatient, and I could hear multiple others moving in the grass around the house. I knew I was running out of time, and my only choice really was to listen to the owner and leave, hoping he was telling the truth. I walked over to the door. When I got up to it, the knocking stopped. I opened the door. There were two older men there, both looking rugged and with straight, emotionless faces. Footsteps were walking through the grass somewhere to the side of the house. Otherwise, it was dead silent. I was horrified, shaking as I slowly stepped outside. They just watched me, not saying a word, as I walked past them and got into my car, leaving the property. Once I was safe, I called the owner's number back to ask them what the hell just happened, but the call didn't go through. He had blocked me, and, against my best judgment at the time, I didn't call the cops. I took so long in deciding, feeling weird about calling the cops to someone else's house when he didn't ask me to, and overall just feeling like it was out of my place and up to the owners to deal with whatever was going on, because clearly they didn't want me to know anything. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't listen and stayed inside. I know the group of people would likely have broken in, and I'm not sure if they would have let me go had it come to that. It's been almost a whole decade since this happened, and I still think about it from time to time, but never had come to any conclusions on what was really going on at that house.
Story 2. I work for the city as a type of general contractor for regular work that needs to be done around town. A lot of the kind of stuff I do is seasonal work, and this happened during winter, so a good portion of my shifts are driving the snow-plow to clear all the roads. Even on the days it didn't snow, I'd be salting the roads or plowing the leftover snow that we didn't get to the days before. I always volunteered to switch over my shifts to night shifts around this time of year because it was way calmer and peaceful to plow the roads when it was dark and empty. This night, I clocked in at the warehouse at 10 p.m. There was a massive snowstorm coming through the town that had started a few hours ago. I quickly checked which sections of town I was assigned, then got the keys and hopped in the plow truck. Even the roads that I could tell had already been plowed were starting to get bad again, and the heavy snowfall made it really hard to see. Luckily, no one else seemed to be out on the roads. I made my way about 20 minutes down to the southeast part of town that I was assigned to plow. I had been doing this for years, so I knew all the sections like the back of my hand. This area was the older part of town, the neighborhoods that had been there for who knows how long. Some of the houses had been rebuilt or heavily renovated because so many people nowadays moved there just for the land that the houses sit on. It was much more quiet and spread out there. Only downside, at least for my job, was that the roads were thin. I'd call them 1.5-lane roads, wider than a single-lane one-way road, but not wide enough for two cars to pass by each other without slowing down first. So obviously, bringing the snowplow through there can be a bit difficult. At night, I usually didn't have to worry too much about it, though. Anyway, when I got to the neighborhood, I began circling in and out of the streets, pushing the snow off the road. A big, spread-out neighborhood like this takes a while. I was probably in the front of the neighborhood for almost 2 hours. I think I remember seeing it was close to 1 a.m. when I finished and started making my way further in toward the back of the neighborhood, and that's when I pulled up behind a car. Nearly had to slam on the brakes because in the storm I couldn't see them until they were just 30 feet ahead of me. It was some old beat-up dark red car, stopped right in the middle of the road. No way to get around this guy, even with a normal car. I waited a while, and the car didn't flash its hazards or move at all, so I thought he might have been stuck. I put the plow in park and hopped out, walking through the deep snow-covered street and up to the car. Just as I got a few feet away, the driver's side door swung open and the man stepped out. As I started asking if he was stuck and needed help getting out, I noticed he looked really disturbing, not like anyone I'd seen before. He was very thin. His hair was disheveled, and his face looked exhausted, yet his eyes stayed wide open like he hadn't slept in days, but was hopped up on caffeine. I switched my question over to, "Are you okay?" This guy did not look well at all. I took a couple steps closer to try but he mumbled something under his breath. Couldn't hear it through the harsh winds. I said, "What?" And he mumbled again. The man just said, "Leave." I said I was just trying to make sure he was okay. And this time he nearly yelled, "Leave!" So I backed up, and by the time I'd gotten back into my plow truck, he had driven off. I didn't know what the hell was wrong with that guy, but I knew there was something wrong. I stayed parked there for a minute, debating on calling the cops just because of how strange it all was, but I didn't get his tag, so I thought it wouldn't be useful anyway. Besides, he was probably just having a really bad night or something. I continued plowing the streets once another 30 minutes, not seeing anyone at all. Even the snow that was on the streets didn't have very many tire tracks going through them. It looked like everyone had stayed in tonight to weather out the snowstorm. I was back to just going through the motions at this point, plowing the calm roads and wondering when the snow would stop falling, when I had to hit my brakes again. It was that same car, the old red one, stopped right in the middle of the street. This was a different spot from before, though. I looked around, and there was only one house on this part of the road. After 30 seconds of waiting, I tapped on the horn, but got nothing in return. He stayed parked right there in the road. This time, I decided it was too strange and got on the line with the police to report this really unusual behavior. The license plate was covered in snow, or maybe just by the blizzard. I couldn't tell, so I got out to get a closer look. Pretty much just when I did, I saw through his windows that the car was empty. No one was in there. I kept the operator updated that I didn't know where the guy was, but then I heard something. A scream, faintly cutting through the wind. It came from the house right off the road. I took a few steps closer, unsure if I'd heard it correctly, and that's when I heard it again and saw that the front door was wide open. I sort of put the pieces together of the man being gone and the house being open and knew something horrible was going on. I called out as I started running through the deep snow to get to the front door. I told the operator everything that was going on,
and of course they told me to wait in the truck for an officer to get there. I didn't listen. I went up to the front door, and the inside of the house was dark, aside from a hallway light glowing from upstairs, and I could hear the horrifying screams of a woman calling for help, muffled by the sounds of someone slamming their body into the bedroom door. I hurried up the staircase and found the disturbing-looking guy trying to break down the door, slamming his shoulder into it, kicking it, and doing everything he could to get it open. He didn't even turn to look at me or stop when I approached him. It wasn't until I pulled him away that he started fighting back. I was able to get control of him enough to keep him away from the door. The guy was completely losing it, and I hadn't noticed until I managed to pin into the ground that there was a knife on the floor at the other end of the hallway. I think in the struggle he had tried to grab it from his pocket at some point and lost control of it before he could do anything. I knew the moment I saw it that I had gotten really lucky. A few minutes later, he ran out of energy and couldn't fight much more, and when police arrived, they cuffed him and brought him in. Now, I think most of what happened is pretty easy to put together, but I still feel like I didn't get a lot of specifics from the officers in the weeks afterwards. All I know is the house he broke into was his ex-wife's house, where I guess he also used to live. Probably lost it in the divorce, and lost his mind as well. That's all the details I managed to get. I still feel slightly guilty for not calling the police the first time I saw him, because I did have a bad feeling about him. I just didn't think it could have possibly been that bad. Thankfully, everyone managed to be okay afterwards, though.
Story 3.
Recently, I picked up a job doing overnight deliveries. There's a few companies that hire people to do this, and having been an Uber driver for the last several years, I thought this would be a good change. The official title of this kind of job is flex drivers, meaning you use your own car and deliver stuff on a flexible schedule. They always did overnights for the extra pay and the ease of the work. 99% of what I did was picking up Amazon packages and delivering it to houses throughout the town. I think because it was sort of a new thing, it was never really well planned in the system. Like all the deliveries were often far from each other. On this night, I had started late, around 11-ish, and went straight to the warehouse to get my packages, then started heading to the delivery locations. First few went well, nothing special to note, but my next delivery was really far out, about 40 minutes from the previous one, which I'm getting paid for it, so it doesn't matter, but still, a long drive is a long drive just for a single delivery. I made my way all the way out there, passing through the shady part of town that I wasn't too familiar with. I saw on the label that it had a unit number on the address, which is a telltale sign that it's going to be an apartment complex. Often there's package rooms to leave them in, or special directions of some kind. That somehow always caused issues, like not being able to access the package room, or not being able to find the right units. When I pulled up to the address, I knew it was going to have one of these issues. The building was old and looked like it should have been torn down years ago, but a few apartment lights were on in the windows. It was very still outside. I didn't see anyone around. I got the package and stepped out, walking around the building to the package room. But of course, the door was locked and there was no code on the order. So I walked back around to the main entrance to the apartment building, but the lobby was locked as well. In cases like these, I just drop it off outside the door. However, in the 30 seconds I was out there, a man came up to me. He was tall, with a thick winter jacket, and looked maybe 50-ish with a gray beard. At first, he just walked up and said, "How's it going?" So I nodded and moved aside, assuming he was trying to get into the building. But the man stopped right next to me and just stood there for a second. I said sorry and stepped further back, saying he could go in and that I was just dropping off a package. The man said no worries and asked how my night was going, still standing in the same spot. That's when I realized he was actually trying to talk to me and start a conversation, which was pretty weird given we were alone out there at like 2 in the morning.
I confusedly said my night was all right and I was just doing some deliveries, making up that I was running behind and had to go. I started walking back to my car, but heard him start asking about my job, like he didn't hear that I just said I had to go. I heard him take a couple steps behind me before I got my car and pulled away, leaving the parking lot. I didn't know what that was, but knowing that I was in a shady area of town had me a little more worried about it. At least I got away, though. I pulled over a few minutes down the road to situate the other packages and figure out what was next. I found one of them. I was 15 minutes from me. I put my blinker on to get back onto the road, seeing a car coming up in my mirror and waiting for them to pass so I can merge back in. But the car started slowing down until I realized it was pulling off to the shoulder right behind me. I didn't bother staying and just got back onto the road and continued to the next address. I thought it had to be a coincidence, just some strange night I was having. I drove the 15 minutes getting to the house. It was a regular home in a very typical neighborhood. I made sure I had the right box, then headed up the driveway and up to the door. Not 20 seconds later, I saw a light coming from down the road. I turned and glanced over my shoulder, seeing a car driving slowly along the street, and when it stopped right behind mine, my whole body went cold. I didn't ever get a good view of the car that tried to stop behind me before, but this was too much to be a coincidence. I was sure it had to be the same car from 15 minutes ago, and somehow even then I had never connected that it could have been the guy from the apartment complex. It seemed so impossible, but when I saw him looking at me through the window, I knew I needed to get out of there right away. I sprinted for my car. The man saw me running and pulled his car around, blocking the front of mine, and he got out just as I got in. His friendly, albeit creepy face from before was gone. He looked pissed off. He ran up to my window and started punching it. I backed up to go around him, but he ran right in front of my car. The guy was screaming, too. Nothing sensible, though. It almost didn't even sound like English, just a mesh of random words that meant nothing. I started backing up until I was far enough that he ran back to get in his car. Then I sped past him. I knew he'd follow, so I called 911 and desperately asked for help. An officer was nearby, so they told me to just keep driving and updating them on where I was. At some point, I don't know if it was a minute or two after driving, I noticed the man behind me wasn't there anymore. I met up with an officer soon after that, and to be perfectly honest, I thought this was going to be a case where we never found out who he was, but I guess the guy was pretty stupid. He ordered the package that I delivered to the apartment complex, using a random fake address of one of the units, but still using his real name. They even found him the next day hanging around the complex, still waiting on a different package, presumably to try again, whatever it was he was doing. When they questioned him, he was described as a psychotic person that had no real reason for anything he was doing. And while that answer didn't satisfy me, that was that. It's scary knowing how quickly and randomly you can run into someone that has horrible intentions without even having motives. I think if I didn't get away, there would have been nothing I could have done to stop him from doing whatever it was he was intending.